3 years ago, Lucy moved into the Maplestone Enhanced Care Home, where she was very well looked after. I visited her from time to time when I was up from Yarmouth, and the staff was always so friendly and always taking care of her. So if any are from the home here today, we want to thank you for that. She'd been in declining health, and she was 98, but she'd been in declining health for some time. A few years ago, she survived a stroke, and then she had a heart attack. She had a fall and broke her breastbone, but still lived to the ripe old age of 98. So that in itself is pretty amazing. And Barb told me that Lucy was chair dancing, whatever that is, only 2 days before she died. So that was kind of Lucy. She was predeceased by her husband, Clary, her sons, Brian and Kevin, her grandson, Joseph, as well as her brother, Gordon, and her sisters, Jean, Marjorie, who was my mother, Kay, and Eleanor. She's survived by her sisters, Carol and Belle, and her daughters, Barbara and Lee-Ellen, and her son, Stephen, and many grandchildren and great-grandchildren, as well as many, many friends that she met over the years. Lucy was born to her parents, Winifred, Winnie, and George Camp, in November of 1919, in a little outport on the south coast of Newfoundland called Pushthrough. Now, my mother said that the reason it was called Pushthrough is that in Pushthrough there's a little gut, a little V-shaped rock formation in the rock, and which separates. There's a little island off the mainland, and it was very tiny. And at high tide, there was a wharf there, and Granddad could tie up a schooner. But at low tide, it was empty. It was bare. Well, apparently one time, a whale got stuck going through that gut, and the locals had to get out and push the whale through. And so that's how the town came called Pushthrough. I don't know whether that's a true story or not, but it sure makes for a good story. So that's where Lucy was born, a little outport that clung to the rocks in Newfoundland, on the south coast of Newfoundland. So my grandmother, my Aunt Lucy, she was a Newfie, but you couldn't really tell, certainly not from the way she talked. My grandmother occasionally dropped her H's. There was a slight kind of Newfie accent there. But apparently when Lucy and my mom and the other sisters who were born in Newfoundland dropped their H's or said something kind of a Newfie twang, grandmother would rap their knuckles. So kind of took that part of the Newfoundland out of them. So you couldn't tell Lucy was a Newfie by the way she talked, but I think her heritage was seen in the fact that she was so tough and resilient. Around 1929, of course, there was hard times everywhere, but especially in Newfoundland. So Granddad moved his growing family to Halifax, and Lucy was 9 at the time. So this is where she grew up. Lucy and my mom were the 2 oldest of the camp girls, and they were very close. They were inseparable all through high school. They went to the Halifax County Academy. So sometimes later, Clary was working at Simpson Sears in the accounting department, and Lucy was working there as a sales clerk. Well, one day, Clary was in the cafeteria having lunch when he spied what he later described as that chatty little blonde. Can you imagine who he's talking about? It was Lucy. So he was kind of interested in Lucy, but Lucy had just broken up with her boyfriend at the time, and she was not interested in another one. But Clary, knowing a good thing when he saw it, he was persistent, and finally Lucy agreed to go out with him. And you know what they say, or at least they used to say, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes Clary pushing a baby carriage. So that's what happened. First the carriage contained Brian, then Barbara, then Stephen, then Kevin, and finally Lee-Ellen. Well, Uncle Clary ended up working at the CBC. He was an excellent writer, and something that he passed on to his kids. And he used to write the news for the CBC. And I remember we were in Halifax on one occasion, one summer, when we were small, and we were really super excited to hear Uncle Clary read the news on the radio. It's like we felt we were related to a real celebrity. Well, by the time Lucy and Clary got married, her parents, my grandparents, and some of her sisters in Halifax had become Jehovah's Witnesses. Both my mom and Lucy were avid students, and they loved the Bible. So eventually, they ended up studying the Bible with the Witnesses, started coming to the meetings held here in Halifax, and both got baptized as witnesses around the same time, 1949. So ever since, Lucy displayed really a very strong love for her God, Jehovah, all those years, right up to her death. Lucy really was a remarkable woman. First of all, like my mother, Marge, she was short. She was very short. And it seemed like the older she got, the shorter she got. I love the picture that she had up in her room at Maplestone. Shows her with Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil, who must be a really tall guy. Because Stephen McNeil's up here and Aunt Lucy is down here. So it was just a nice picture she had up. She was proud of that. But don't let her size fool you. Lucy had spunk. She was really a firecracker. She was small, but you'd better not mess with her. I remember my mom telling me stories of when she and Lucy used to go downtown, maybe on weekends or nights or something. This was just before World War II. And of course there was lots of sailors in town. And oftentimes they would receive unwanted advances from groups of these young sailors. But these two young gals from Newfoundland, Lucy and my mom, they would fend off those guys in no uncertain terms. Some of my favorite memories as a kid, we lived in Ottawa, and we used to come down east every 2 or 3 years for our summer vacation, and we'd always visit the Potties and stay with them on their big house on the Edmonds grounds. And now the Potty kids were bad. But put them together with the Smith kids and other various relatives, the Thomases and the Barretts, Irwins, and what's invariably happened, like there was like 2 or 3 families at least all together, and it was mayhem in a nice way. I do remember one time Stephen and I finding Barb's diary, and it was Stephen's idea though, and running upstairs into the attic, and we were laughing and reading excerpts and laughing and carrying on. Well, Barb and her mom, Aunt Lucy, they ran up the stairs and they were pounding on the attic door, screaming threats at us. And you know what? I wasn't so scared of Barb, but I was really scared of Aunt Lucy. And then there was Kevin. Maybe some of you remember Kevin, but he always seemed to be getting into trouble. And even then, he was a pretty big kid. So Aunt Lucy would chase him through the house, this is the memory I have, with a wooden spoon, although my sister Kathy in Africa, she insists it was a toothbrush. She was trying to get him to brush his teeth. But whatever, Lucy was chasing him, telling him in no uncertain terms, he better behave or he was going to get it. And I seem to remember, I was going to check about this beforehand, but the old house on Edmonds ground, it was big house, like 3 stories, or the top story was an attic, and there was a front set of stairs, and then there was the back set of stairs, and Lucy would run chasing Kevin up one set of stairs and down the other. That's what it seemed like to me, and around and around. It went for a long time. But Kevin was younger and he was stronger, and he, as he sometimes did, he got away from his mother. But so the story is that when Kevin would go to bed, go to sleep, Lucy would sneak into his bedroom with a wooden spoon in. So she was a good mom. But she had her hands full. She was strict, but she was loving. She was tough when she needed to be, but she could also be tender when she needed to be. And one thing as a distinct memory I have from Aunt Lucy is that she really loved her family. She was so proud of all her kids. Something I learned about Lucy this week that I never knew before was that, unlike my mother, Lucy was very organized. Schedule was almost her favorite word, I've said. She was very scheduled. Meals in the Potty household were like on time, the same time every day. And bedtimes were strictly enforced. Even food portions, because, you know, there wasn't a lot of money to go around. And so she had a schedule what they would eat. And I remember being there again one summer, and Lucy was a good cook. We had this big meal, and there was pie for dessert. So you couldn't ask for like another piece of pie because there was one. That was what your scheduled. So one of the kids, I had this memory that it was Leon, but she didn't want pie, so she auctioned it off to the around the table. So she was scheduled. She liked to get things done, get organized. Barb mentioned that Lucy was very proud of the fact that all her kids were potty trained at 9 months. Well, I think she used the term toilet trained. Even as a young child, Lucy had an interest in the Bible and in spiritual things, as did Granddad and Grandmother. In Newfoundland, they attended the Church of England. And I have to tell you this story because Granddad, he was interested in the Bible, but he wasn't, not that he was irreverent, but he wasn't impressed with high-sounding titles. So somebody in the family, one of the cousins or uncles or something, I think it was one of my grandfather's cousins, he became a canon in the Church of England, and he was very proud of that. So he came to Push Through, and he was telling everybody, "I'm a canon. No, I'm a canon." And Granddad said, "What were you before, a pop gun?" But he did have an interest in the Bible. And shortly after they moved to Halifax, they started hanging out quite a bit with my grandmother's sister, Annie. Bessie. Bessie Willman was her last name, I think. And they were studying with Jehovah's Witnesses at the time. So that's how they became involved with the Witnesses. So first Granddad and then Grandmother took the truth, as we call it. This would have been the early 30s, 32, 33, something like that. I remember a story about one of Granddad's first times out in service, or sometimes in the door-to-door ministry. We call it the field ministry, or going out in the field. So Granddad didn't tell Grandmother that he was doing this. Maybe he was a little scared of her. So he got all dressed up, and Grandmother asked him, "George, where are you going?" And Grandmother could be kind of scary. So Granddad, who I remember as being just a quiet, mild soul, simply told her, "I'm going out in the field." So her only answer to that was, "Well then, you better take your rubber boots." So that was his first time out in service. So Grandmother and Granddad and some of the younger girls became witnesses. Eleanor, who later married Morris Irwin, and Sister Belle, they pioneered for a while in the Maritimes, and later on Belle married Ward Barrett from Truro, and Eleanor married, she went to Gilead, and then she came back after that and signed to Quebec, and then she married Morris Irwin. But, so they were very zealous at a young age for the truth, but Lucy and my mom were older and interested in other things, like chasing boys, I guess, at the time. So they both ended up marrying men who were not Jehovah's Witnesses, but they both started studying later on and became witnesses. Lucy was baptized in 1949, so she was a faithful witness for almost 70 years. How many people can say that? It's really amazing. She really leaves a long record of faithful service to Jehovah. She was really left an excellent example for us to follow. But now she's gone. Well, when one of our friends or family members, loved ones die, it's only natural to ask, to give thought at least to a question such as, what happens to us when we die? Where do we go? Why do we die? Is death all there is?